Divine Mercy Radio Catholic 540 AM is proud to present Come to Me, Encounters with the Eucharist, a local program that shares the stories of people who have been drawn to or deepen their faith in the Catholic Church by encountering Jesus in the Eucharist. Welcome your host of Come to Me, Lydia Tatum.
Thank you for joining us for this month's episode of Come to Me, Encounters with the Eucharist, where we will hear another inspiring story of encounter as Jesus continues to call each of us to meet him in the Eucharist. In the Eucharist, we are called to new life, are nurtured by his grace, and as St. John Damascene says, are inflamed in order that we might be united in communion with Christ and with one another. On this episode of Come to Me, we will hear how Jesus in the Eucharist beckons us to unity in the Church. Today, I am joined by Barry Cross. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you.
We are excited that you are in the studio with us, that you are in the church with us as of this Easter. So before I tell your story, Barry, can you tell us where you are situated in the world? Where are you in the diocese, your parish, and just begin sharing a bit about your background?
I am a permanent resident of Raleigh, North Carolina. I grew up here. My parents grew up in the area. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, roots all the way back to the 1700s. I currently go to St. Luke's Parish, which is interesting because my great-grandparents lived within a quarter mile of there.
Oh, wow.
And we're probably very familiar with the land that St. Luke's is on right now.
Very neat. And so you've given us a tad bit about your background. You weren't Catholic in the 1700s. Tell us how that happened.
Well, it's a long road and a long story. Is that my parents were Baptist. My grandparents were Baptist. I had one grandfather who was Methodist, and his family actually donated some land not too far away from St. Luke's. All of my family basically grew up within a 7-mile radius of where St. Luke's is. And they donated land, and a small little Methodist church was built there. And the church is still there, although the Methodists don't still meet there. He's buried there. I have grandparents and great-grandparents buried at this church cemetery. I have, I believe it's 5 to 7 family cemeteries within a 5-mile radius of St. Luke's. And I grew up in a small white clapboard church before they tore it down and built a newer brick church in the Leesville area. And I grew up there and went to Sunday school there, went to church every Sunday there, even though we would have to drive 10 to 15 miles from where my parents lived to get to that church. All my family went there. My grandmother went there. My aunts went there. My uncles went there. So I grew up in that church. And as I grew older, the church started getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it stopped having youth there. And eventually, I was the only youth there my age. And whenever I got to be 16, I wanted to find someplace else. Well, during that time, as you know as a Baptist, is that it's your decision when you want to get baptized and you accept Jesus and say that you've been a sinner and that you feel like Jesus has called you and you accept him as your Savior. Well, most of the kids at the time were doing that at maybe 7, 8, 9 years old. And also during that time, we would have communion, but as you know, as a Baptist, you do it about once a quarter. And it would be basically grape juice and in little shot glasses sent around in a little silver tray, and oyster crackers were the bread. And if the ladies of the church got industrious, they would take and cut up little chunks of Wonder Bread instead of it. Well, I asked Mom and Dad whenever I was younger, how come I can't have the grape juice? And because I like grape juice. Who doesn't like grape juice? And they told me basically you can't do this because this is special. And as I told you before, is that I was standing there one day, and I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and after church, one of the little bit older guys, maybe he was 7 or 8, went up to the front after church and was chugging the grape juice shots after church that were left over. And I was thinking, this isn't so special if he can just walk up there and chug the grape juice shots. Mm-hmm. And, of course, I didn't want the oyster crackers. I wanted some of the grape juice. So fast forwarding, whenever I hadn't been baptized, I hadn't felt the call. And whenever I got to be about 16 and was able to drive, my parents and I talked about it. They said, well, you can go explore other churches. So I went to another church, and I was there probably about 4 to 5 months going to services, and they had what us Baptists refer to as revivals. So you know all about a revival there. Yeah. And during the revival, I found myself out in the middle of the aisle, walking up the aisle and talking to the preacher and telling him that I was a sinner and that I wanted Jesus in my life and I wanted to be baptized. A few months later, I was baptized and then went on from there.
So it sounds like generationally, faith had shaped your family's daily life, really, in kind of centering around a church, donating land, for a church to be built, but then also Sundays, at least, revival time, and I'm guessing Wednesday nights as well. Y'all probably were at church, but it really, as a young man, it wasn't the 7 or 8 year old age of accountability, age of reason time. It was you were really working through the ins and outs of faith because some things weren't adding up when it came to the way that communion was administered. But there was a moment, it sounds like, that you really did understand your need for a Savior around 16 years old. So as you were processing all of that, how did communion, once you were baptized and 16 years old, how did that your understanding start to change or play out?
Well, I accepted the church's teaching on. Now, unlike a lot of Baptists and Protestants in general, and it's always amazed me, and my parents never felt this way or anything else, is a lot of people don't consider Catholics Christian, just like a lot of Catholics don't consider Protestants Christian. Mm-hmm. And I was in a volunteer fire department, and I would go to Mass. You had to ask because nobody ever invites you really to a Catholic Mass. Because of all the standing and kneeling and the ceremony and the tradition that goes along with it. So a lot of my friends at the fire department were Catholic, and I would go to Mass with them occasionally. And I understood the difference in the communion. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that Baptist preachers like to say is they like to give the admonishment that St. Peter gave, don't receive this unworthily, otherwise you bring problems to your body. Well, whenever you say that, and it's not the real presence of Jesus, it's just symbolic, then why does symbolism matter? Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things I always struggled with was why does symbolism matter? And why did they say this? Now, it mattered to me. Mm-hmm. And in times where I felt like I was away from God, where I felt like I was involved in sin and hadn't really been forgiven, even though I had asked to be forgiven, I always felt like I had that sword hanging above my neck, sort of. And so I wouldn't, if they had communion that day, I wouldn't take it because I really felt that it mattered, even though it was symbolic, that it did matter to some degree. And that was sort of a struggle with me. And going to the Mass, I realized that, and I knew that the presence of the body and the blood of Jesus is there and people will have to forgive me because I butchered the words up, and being a new Catholic, I don't know all the right terminology, but during the consecration, I believe, is that, the miracle occurs where Jesus's body and blood is actually there. And I may not be able to tell it, but it occurs. And I know it occurs. And therefore, I believe that it does happen. But if you're just doing it symbolically, then it's like the guy drinking the grape juice. What difference does it make? Mm-hmm. It didn't make a bit of difference then. So I, throughout my life, had some struggles with that, about that. What exactly does it mean? What does the communion mean? And why are we even doing it if it's just symbolism?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to fast forward you a lot, Barry, because it sounds like you are having some pretty significant questions about this and some contact with Catholicism as a young man, which you are no longer. And you just came into to the church this Easter. As you were continuing to grapple with this, to getting married, raising a family, still being a faithful Baptist, going to, to church every week, and I believe you served as a Baptist deacon. Is that correct?
I did.
You were really active and involved, but you've had this contact with the real presence of Christ by going to Mass with friends as a young man. Get us to, I guess, the tipping point here of when it no longer was enough to be in the Baptist church.
And that's an interesting, it has been sort of a long journey here, and you're just sort of winding me up and letting me go with this narrative. And this is the dangerous part right here, is it has been interesting. And I was a deacon, and for those that aren't familiar with Baptist deacons, completely different than a Catholic deacon. A Baptist deacon, I would say, is more of a board of directors, and it's an elected position rather than something that you help administer the sacraments with. And I was a deacon at not one church, but two different churches. And one of the churches I was at, our pastor was having a spiritual crisis, I believe, because instead of going through the Bible and reading from the Bible, and being a Baptist, you believe in the solus
Scriptura.
Sola Scriptura, and I was not only just a Bible-believing guy, I was a King James Bible-believing guy, and he wasn't going out of the Bible at all. He was going out of books he read. And at one point, we were on Wednesday night talking, and he said, well, I really don't believe the story of Jonah happened. And suddenly, one of the other deacons, great guy, wonderful guy, very scripturally based, said, oh, wait a minute. If you don't believe Jonah happened, then there's a couple of things going on here. Is that, number one, Jesus was a liar because he referenced Jonah and is in the New Testament on several occasions that something greater than Jonah is going here. And not only that, he foretold the Son of Man will go in the belly, is going to be dead for 3 days, and then he'll rise again on the third day, foretelling his death and resurrection. So if Jesus referenced Jonah, then the story of Jonah had to exist. And he said, better than that, let's go through the Bible, and we'll ask everybody in the congregation what stories they don't want to believe, and we'll tear those out. And then whenever we get done, all we'll have is two things that say genuine leather. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of churches are doing now, especially Protestant churches. They're going through and saying, right. I don't really want to believe this. Oh, Jesus didn't mean this whenever he said this. Oh, Paul really wasn't serious whenever he said this. So let's tear these pages out. And that's why you got whole denominations now that have completely turned away from anything resembling the original language of the church and the traditions of the church. But really, what started me down this path was my youngest son. Is that during COVID, he was graduating college. And we had gone to several churches, Protestant churches, independent churches. In fact, he had gotten baptized at a larger church here in Raleigh, and because he was invited by a friend. And every time we would go to church, it would be, who are you? Dude, have you been coming here? And we were going there for 3 years, and nobody knew who we were. But he had always been a spiritual guy. Mm-hmm. And during COVID, he was graduating college. And my daughter lives out in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, with her job. And as he graduated college, he was a football player, lifted weights. He was in strongman competitions, a big, big guy. He was invited by my daughter to come out there for a couple of weeks. So he went out there for a couple of weeks during the COVID as he graduated college. And he stayed out there, got a job out there, and started coaching, assistant coach at a local high school, coaching football. Actually played football for the Omaha Beef for a while. And he and some of his coaches' friends were at a restaurant one night. And this server was there, pretty little redheaded girl. And she says, I remember him because he left a good tip. A few weeks later, they go on a blind date that was set up by one of the coach's friends. This girl, an amazing Catholic girl, very devout, very Marian-oriented. Mm-hmm. Her family is a wonderful family. And her grandmother is affectionately known as the Great Converter. She started praying for my son.
I've got some people to send to her then.
I do too. And she started praying for him as soon as they started dating. Mm-hmm. Well, fast forward a few months, 6 months or so. This was 2003, I believe, whenever he started dating her. And they have this moment where they realize, hey, we want to take this a little bit further forward. And she said, I can't go forward, and I can't marry somebody unless they're Catholic. And he said, hey, that's no problem. I was planning on becoming Catholic anyway because she'd been taking him to Mass. He loved the Mass. He went in there and he felt the Holy Spirit the first time in this church there, and just on fire. Mm-hmm. And so he went through OCI. And as he was going, they were dragging my daughter into Mass. Mm-hmm. And he became a Catholic Christian mm-hmm. in Easter of 2004. My daughter went through OCI and became a Catholic Christian in 2005 Easter. So this year, my wife and I became Catholic Christians.
Yeah. So 2023, 24, 25, and 26.
Yes.
And that grandma, we're going to probably need to take her name and number down so that everyone who calls the radio now will have a list to send for this woman to start praying for all of their loved ones and coming to the church. She was powerful.
And she does. She's got a direct line, I think. She would give my wife and I books and stuff like that about Catholicism to read. And I know that she was praying for us mm-hmm. And also for my son and my daughter. And it was just an amazing experience because we started going to church mm-hmm. whenever we would go out there and visit them. Mm-hmm. We would go to the Mass as well. And during that time, we had been looking for a church and trying to figure out where we wanted to go because, like I said, nothing was really working for us here. Mm-hmm. And my wife started going to church with her sister and her father and everything. And she said, whenever you find a church that you like, we'll go to it. Well, during this time we went to the Mass. It's like, I really need to get busy and find a church. And I would go to these various churches, and I'd go 2 or 3 weeks, and it's like, I really don't feel anything here. Or, yes, and a lot of them were just worshiptainment services. Worshiptainment. And it was, you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
Because, mm-hmm. I mean, in Isaiah and the book of Revelation, it talks about them both seeing what's going on in heaven, and I'm pretty sure that Isaiah describes people in the church. I mean, up there around the altar with their Stanley cups full of coffee with bear claws and donut holes and a band singing and people's arms waving around and applause and stuff like that.
I think you found that in Second Opinions, chapter 3. I don't know that was in Isaiah.
No, it's totally opposite of that. It is exactly opposite of that. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of the churches that I went to was. It was if you were to take somebody out of some tribe in the middle of nowhere and put them in a mass and put them in a worshiptainment service, and they had no idea what God or Jesus was, who God Jesus was, they didn't speak the language, anything else, and then later ask them, who's being worshiped here? Mm-hmm. And they would say, well, I'm not sure at the worshiptainment service. I think it has something to do with those people up on stage singing, because they sure are getting a lot of applause and people waving their arms and clapping and everything else. Then you take them to a mass and say, well, who's being worshiped here? They may not know, but they would say, I think it has something to do with that man on that piece of wood up there that's stretched out and nailed to it. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty obvious. And that's the power that the Mass had for me, is going in there and seeing that and feeling the Mass and experiencing it for the first time. And it was just very powerful and moving for me whenever I would go to Mass. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting that, I have a lot of people to thank during this journey, and you're one of them. Because whenever I came back from Nebraska, it's like, well, I think I need to go to a Mass here and see. And so I started going on Wednesday at the noon Mass because, you don't want to be outed. You don't want to have the Catholic police come and say, well, wait a minute, you aren't doing this properly.
There is a bit of imposter syndrome that you have to overcome when you first start visiting and attending Masses. It's a little nerve-wracking, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It's a lot of going on. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of intricacy. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of moving parts going on. And it takes a while to figure out sort of what's going on. I haven't figured it out yet. A lot of times, I'm still listening to the thing that Catholic Productions has, where Brad Petrie does the Mass in a year or whatever, 52 episodes, and I think Ascension just had one where he does it in 30 days, and it's a lot to learn. Yeah. It really is. And if you aren't familiar with it, it is sort of overwhelming at first. And actually, you were talking about earlier going to Mass, is that I was in the military and I got mobilized. Mm-hmm. And it so happened that a priest from the unit that I was with also was mobilized. And he was a priest here in Raleigh. And whenever everybody had retrograded back into northern Kuwait, about 10 or 15 miles from the Iraq border, he was going to have Mass at the camp we were at. And they said, so-and-so's having Mass over here. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'll go to the Mass. After the Mass, he comes up to me, and I don't know how he knew I was Baptist, but he said, what's a good Baptist boy like you doing at a Catholic Mass on Easter? I said, Father, I just have to support the home team. You're the home team. I've got to support you. So, great guy. I went to several more Masses while he was there, and then he got sent back to North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And it was just a great experience, a wonderful man and everything doing that. And so I did have experience with Mass at other places. And, if you think about it, having Mass in the middle of the Kuwait desert, you aren't too far away removed from the Holy Land. You think, well, hey, maybe the wise men traverse this area.
Wow, yeah.
Going to see, the newborn Savior. Maybe they walked across this area, stuff like that. So it was very, very interesting, very very desolate area to have a Mass in, but it was very interesting.
It sounds like, because I can imagine for Baptist parents to hear that their Baptist children are converting to Catholicism, that it might be a little jarring. But it sounds like you had been prepared all along the way by friends, by brothers in the volunteer fire department and brothers in the military to be ready for the day that grandma started praying for you and got you into the church finally. That I'm sure there were different emotions that went through you and your wife's minds and hearts as your son begins this journey. But the Holy Spirit had really been priming you too, long before your son and your daughter came into the church. But walk us through that. Walk us through what it was like to hear your son and your daughter, and then eventually you and your wife come into the conclusion as well.
It was just one of those things where my son was just matter of fact about it. Mm-hmm. He and his future wife we were out there, and he and his future wife were there, and he said, almost as though he was saying, I'm going to go to the grocery store and get some milk. Do you need anything? He said, oh, I'm going to become Catholic. Uh-huh. And it was, with us, okay. Mm-hmm. Neither my wife or I were, I know a lot of parents would tear their hair out or something like that. They were Baptists, but with us, it's because neither of us ever thought of Catholics as not being Christian.
Right.
And unfortunately, like I said earlier, a lot of Protestants think, oh, that's horrible. Mm-hmm. And with us, it was never that way. Mm-hmm. And, whenever I got back and was going to the Mass on Wednesday, I noticed that St. Luke's was going to have a Bible study. It's like, well, now's the time to jump into the pool and see, and see what's going on. And it happened to be the Vacation Bible School for Adults. It was the short version of a Bible study, and it was the Protestant Reformation, mm-hmm. or as they called it, the Protestant Revolution. Mm-hmm. And it was, I believe, Dr. Brant Petrie mm-hmm. had a series on it. And I went to the class, and I sat down, and I can remember sitting in class saying, well, I hope they don't have a bunch of firewood and burn me as a heretic when they find out I'm a Baptist here. And that's the first thing I said, is that we went around the room and introduced myself. And I said, I'm the only Baptist in the room. And there was no shock, no, oh my goodness, or no people crossing themselves or anything else. No, the lighter was not pulled out. And I was accepted. Mm-hmm. And during that class, it was very interesting to learn, and I never had really given a lot of thought to it, but for 1,500 years, you were either basically Catholic or Jewish. Mm-hmm. There was no, vinyl pulpit, Baptist, independent churches or Methodists. There wasn't anything except that. And then once Martin Luther started, now we got, 40,000 different denominations now.
And counting.
But it was very interesting to hear, and it wasn't just propaganda either. Oh, all the popes were wonderful. No, they said, oh, we've had some bad popes. Mm-hmm. And we've had some really great popes. And these popes pushed things along like they should have. We talked about how the response was somewhat slow to Martin Luther. And then you finally had Pope Pius V taking and getting the Council of Trent organized and getting everything together and pushing that forward. But it was nice to hear, hey, just like now, sometimes you have good shepherds. Sometimes you have bad shepherds. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just, oh, everybody was perfect and infallible and everything else. It's that, hey, they were the chosen of God, but because they were men, they were fallible. Mm-hmm. And it's like David, whenever Saul was pursuing him, he had, 3 or 4 occasions where he could have killed Saul. And he said, no, I'm not killing him because he's God's chosen man. Mm-hmm. And so whenever you have people like that in charge, that's God's anointed person. For good or for bad, it's God's anointed person. And you wind up with, you had some good popes in the past, you had some bad popes. Mm-hmm. But the church was not broken. Right. Despite the bad ones, the church was not broken. Mm-hmm. And that was the interesting part about it. So I finished the class, and I got a book in, I believe it was May. I'd gotten the book before I started going to class in May of 2024, which really was a turning point. And it was a Brant Petrie book, Jesus and the Jewish Roots of the Eucharist. Yeah. I learned so much reading that book that about the development of the Eucharist. And there were things that I didn't know as a Baptist. For example, is that Josephus said after Jesus died, it was at some point after Jesus died, during the Passover meal, that approximately, I believe that they said, 250,000 lambs were brought in. That's a lot of blood because all the blood was thrown on the altar. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, the interesting part was all these lambs were staked out with their front paws spread out on a piece of wood. Mm-hmm. And then the board was ran down behind them, and then their back paws were also staked on a piece of wood. So you had somewhat of a form of a cross. And these lambs were slain, taken back to the homes, and they weren't just discarded. They were eaten. Mm-hmm. And then I started thinking, in Brant Petrie, well, Jesus said, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you are not a part of me. That's powerful. That's not symbolic, because his followers said, well, wait a minute, we just can't handle this, Jesus. And we know you speak in metaphors, and we know that you speak in symbolism and that you use parables, but we're having a hard time with this because we're Jewish. We aren't supposed to drink the blood. And Jesus reiterated it and said, you cannot, I will not acknowledge you before my Father unless you do this. And a bunch of them left and went back to what they were doing before. And Jesus turned to the apostles and said, well, are you going to leave now? And they said, no. We don't know what's going on, but we love you and we understand that. And that's pretty powerful, because if the Jews are eating the lamb, and they also had the blood thrown on them during the sacrifice, and they cooked the lamb, ate the lamb, and Jesus is saying, you got to do this with me, then what is that? That's the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. It's no longer symbolic. Mm-hmm. It's real. Mm-hmm. And so that, I believe, was truly the tipping point for me to say, I gotta start making a serious effort here and examining my conscience on this. And I'm interesting is that one of the worshiptainment churches I'd gone to, I called up and I said, is it okay if I can meet with the preacher? And this is before I came to St. Luke's. Is it okay to meet with the preacher and just talk to him a little bit about the church and everything? They said, well, he's kind of busy. Do you need prayer? We can pray with you. We can have somebody else call you. It's like, no, I just want to sit down and talk to the preacher. Oh, he's too busy to talk to you. I go to St. Luke's, and at the time, the priest was sort of a visiting priest. So I go to him after one service. I said, do you have some time I can talk to you? He said, yeah. How's next Wednesday? Just make an appointment. I called up to make an appointment. Oh, yeah, the priest has already done this. And so I went in and talked to him an hour. I'd talked to my daughter and son's priest, too, before that. But I was saying, hey, my son just converted. He didn't say these exact words, but he said, well, what do you mean by converted? I said, well, he became a Catholic. He goes, well, what was his conversion? Was he a Druid? It's like, no, he was a Baptist. And I'd never heard it put like this before. He goes, oh, he's not converting. He's just becoming a Catholic Christian because we believe one baptism, acceptance, all that type of stuff that he went through. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I never heard it put that way before. And it just warmed my heart that he was so warm, accepting, and inviting, like the people in the Bible study were just warm and accepting and inviting and answered any questions I had. And not only that, in the Bible study, they were saying, well, what do you think about this? Being the Baptist in the room, well, what are your feelings on this? And you fast forward to last year, my son, my son was involved in a pretty bad accident and almost killed. He wound up in the hospital. My wife went out there for several months to help him get back. He got married on the 3rd of May, and the accident happened on the 28th of May.
Wow.
And we went rushing back out there. And my wife stayed for several months. And I called her one night, and I said, yeah, I'm not too sure about what you want to do, but I'm going to become Catholic. And she said, I was going to tell you the same thing. So it was like we were both on the same page. Hadn't talked about it, hadn't conferred or anything else, or said this is the plan. But, we both made the decision independently. So the Holy Spirit was working in us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when your wife got back from Nebraska, you guys started headlong into OCIA and daily Mass as much as you guys can be there. And you have been just such a testament to the power of the Eucharist drawing someone into the church. It's so, we're warm because we smelled fresh meat. And that's what happened. They saw a Baptist wander into the den and said, come on. And so but for all of the parish at St. Luke, especially those who know you, they have been, your faith has set their faith on fire.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
So watching you and Pam come in and just absorb everything and hunger and thirst for the Eucharist has started that within them as well. And you've built such a beautiful community with that Bible study community that you have there. But seeing you guys at Mass and being a part of your sacraments for the first time, we're all watching you. We're so excited every time you get to receive the Eucharist.
I appreciate that. One of the deacons from St. Raphael said, I was just so excited to see you up there receiving the Eucharist. Yeah. It's like, really? Yeah. That's completely awesome and everything. And it's just been a wonderful journey. And it's just, a lot of it's just so overwhelming, though, because I want to learn so much. Mm-hmm. I want to grow quickly. I've got a stack of books that I'm trying to get through. And
we all are, Barry.
And it's just a huge stack, and it keeps growing. And Pam says, how come you keep ordering books? It's like I'll forget them if I don't order it now. Mm-hmm. But it's just been a wonderful journey. But I would encourage anybody that is Catholic, that is listening, invite a friend. Mm-hmm. And explain to them before they go, hey, this is going to be different than any service you go to. And we could talk about it afterwards, or I can give you the Reader's Digest version before. But as one of my Catholic friends did say, it's sort of difficult to be an evangelist being a Catholic, because everybody sort of knows what a Baptist or a Methodist, you go in and everything's pretty straightforward. Catholicism is different, but it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. It is actually absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Well, and you really did jump in, feet, head, all body first when it came to the faith, because how long was it after you came into the church that you were on pilgrimage in Rome?
We just got back. My daughter,
so a month or so, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. My daughter and I, her parish had a trip planned. And it happened that I was out there whenever the priest announced that they were going to have a pilgrimage to Rome or to Italy. And my daughter said, I'm going. And I said, well, I'll go with you. Mm-hmm. And it was the most fantastic and moving experience of perhaps of my life. Mm-hmm. One of the things was, and I didn't anticipate this because my knees are terrible. Not as bad as my wife's knees, but they're terrible. And from playing too much basketball on asphalt courts and stuff like that, and falling. And one of the things is at the Holy Stairs there at St. John the Lateran.
Yeah.
We got there and I'm thinking, I'm not going to try to go up. This is 28 stairs. I'm not going to be able to go up on my knees. I walked in. I started bawling. Mm-hmm. And I got down on the first step, and I don't know, it felt like I was just pushed down on the first step, and by the third step, I was just in terrible pain. Mm. And I'm thinking, I wonder if I can back down here. And I know there are prayers that you are supposed to go through on each one. I didn't know those, so I was just doing Hail Marys and Our Fathers. Mm-hmm. And I did finally make it up to the top. It was about 40 minutes because the people in front took a while to go through it. I was in a lot of pain doing it, not as much as Jesus was for me, though, whenever he went up those steps. I got to the top. I was covered in sweat. I was in pain and everything else. But I just felt so moved by it. And it's funny afterwards, it's that people said, well, I was just concentrating on the frescoes and stuff like that. I said, there were frescoes? I didn't see any frescoes. I was sweating too much to see frescoes. But it was a wonderful experience. Perhaps, and I want to go back. Mm. We went to Assisi. We went to the Padre Pio shrine in San Giovanni. We went to Florence. We had an audience with the Pope, and by the way, he said to tell you hello.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. He and my daddy grew up in the same neighborhood in Chicago, wow. So yeah, we know each other really well.
I was within a few hundred yards of him, less than 100 yards. I'm probably about 50 yards of him, and I didn't expect the reaction. It was just so much energy there during that time. But we went to masses the priests did mass at all these different places. But perhaps my favorite church while we were there was the place that we did mass at first. And it was let me see if I can do this right. It was the Spirito Sancto in Sassa, which is the Divine Mercy, the Church of Santo Spirito in Sassa, the Divine Mercy Shrine. Mm. It's got relics of Pope St. John Paul II there and St. Faustina, and it is just such a beautiful little church, just a stone's throw away from the Vatican. It really was, and it was very moving to have Mass there. Mm-hmm.
And to receive the Eucharist.
Exactly.
As a Catholic. That's just fantastic.
And at Padre Pio's shrine, at St. Francis of Assisi, at all these places we went, we had a daily Mass, and it was just moving and just such a wonderful experience being there. And I would encourage anybody that has not been on a pilgrimage to Italy to find one, to go, to get your parish, to get one up, to contact people that do these and do it. And it's something you will not regret going to all these places.
Well, Barry, we are... the royal we at St. Luke's especially, and the wider Catholic community are so just overjoyed at you being home in the church, that you get to receive the Eucharist and be with Jesus in communion every single time you go to Mass. We're overjoyed for you and for your wife and your whole family. Again, we're going to need that number of that grandma who's praying because she's really good at what she does. But we are just grateful that you would share your story with us. Thank you for being here. Your witness to those around you, your work in the world. It encourages our listeners, of course, on their own journeys, but it encourages every person you meet towards a deeper encounter with Jesus, a deeper union with Christ, and we're grateful for you.
And I appreciate you inviting me to come here and to share this.
Absolutely. Thank you to our wonderful production team here at Divine Mercy Radio. You can listen to this episode again or previous episodes of Come to Me, in addition to all of our local programming, on our website at DivineMercyRadio.org/local programs. You can listen anytime on the free Divine Mercy Radio NC app or your favorite podcast platform. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Come to Me. I am Lydia Tatum, and until next time, Jesus and the most blessed sacrament, hear our prayer.